The massive chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with hundreds of different voices and sounds from across the galaxy as Ambassador Zethkar stepped up to the main platform where all the important announcements were made to the gathered representatives of thousands of star systems and alien species. The tall, crystalline being's multiple eyes moved across the floating holographic displays that showed detailed information about newly discovered worlds throughout their section of the galaxy, and each planet was carefully rated based on how advanced their technology was and whether they might pose any kind of threat to the established galactic order that had kept peace for over 1,000 years. Zethkar's voice echoed through the chamber's advanced translation systems as he began his presentation to the assembled council members who represented every major civilization known to exist in their region of space. Most of the planets on today's list were either completely uninhabited rocks floating in the void or home to primitive life forms that had barely discovered fire and would not be ready for contact with galactic civilization for thousands of years to come. Today, we have several new worlds to discuss and classify according to our standard protocols, Zethkar announced, as the first few planets appeared on the main display showing barren worlds with no signs of intelligent life. The routine classifications went quickly as usual, with most worlds being marked as either uninhabitable or requiring monitoring for primitive species that might develop into something interesting over the next few millennia. And finally, we come to a rather unremarkable system designated Sol, with the third planet being called Earth by its inhabitants who refer to themselves as humans, Zethkar said with a tone that made it clear he considered this world barely worth mentioning to the assembled council. The holographic display showed a blue and green planet with a single moon orbiting around a yellow star that looked completely ordinary compared to the thousands of other systems they had catalogued over the centuries. Council member Vex Thol from the powerful Hive Collective leaned forward on his 6 legs and clicked his sharp mandibles together in what passed for amusement among his insectoid species. "What level of technological development have these humans achieved?" he asked, while his compound eyes studied the basic information scrolling past on the display screens. "Our deep space monitoring stations classify them as barely reaching Type 0, 7 on the standard civilization scale," Zethkar replied, as more detailed scans of Earth appeared, showing cities that looked primitive compared to the crystal spires and floating metropolises found on more advanced worlds. "They still burn ancient fossil fuels for most of their energy needs and engage in constant warfare between different tribal groups across their planet's surface," he continued, while highlighting various conflict zones that their monitoring systems had detected. The display changed to show examples of human technology, including their most advanced spacecraft, which appeared to be crude, chemical-powered rockets that could barely reach their own moon with any reliability. "Their computational systems are extremely basic, using silicon-based processors that operate at speeds we abandoned thousands of years ago," Zethkar explained while showing images of what humans called their most powerful computers. "They have recently developed nuclear weapons, but these are simple fusion devices that would barely scratch the paint on our standard shield generators," he added with obvious disdain. High above the main council floor in the observation gallery, that was normally reserved for visiting dignitaries and researchers, Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Survey vessel Endeavour watched the proceedings through a small translation device that had been provided by the Neutral Traders Guild, who were always willing to sell technology to anyone with enough credits. The experienced astronaut kept his expression carefully neutral as he listened to his entire species being dismissed as primitive and unworthy of serious consideration by these alien civilizations. Sitting next to Captain Morrison was Dr. Lisa Martinez, who served as Earth's leading expert on alien biology and had been taking detailed notes on every species they had encountered during their secret mission to observe galactic civilization. She carefully recorded information about alien physiology, behavioral patterns, and what appeared to be significant weaknesses in their military formations and political structures that might prove useful in the future. I motion that we classify Sol 3 as a protected primitive world under standard quarantine protocols, announced Counselor Neftim, whose graceful aquatic form rippled with bioluminescent patterns as she spoke. We should maintain minimal contact with this species until they achieve Type 1 civilization status, which may take them several thousand years if they manage to avoid destroying themselves first, she added, while her large eyes showed the kind of pity that advanced species often felt for primitive worlds. The motion passed with a unanimous vote of 347 in favor and 0 opposed, as every single member of the Galactic Council agreed that Earth and humanity posed no threat whatsoever to galactic civilization. The official records would show that Earth was now classified as a backwater world that barely deserved periodic monitoring to ensure they did not develop dangerous technologies too quickly. What none of the assembled alien representatives realized was that Captain Morrison's seemingly primitive spacecraft had not arrived at this location by accident or through any kind of lucky discovery of alien technology. Hidden deep within the cargo bay of his vessel were quantum scanning devices that had been secretly recording every piece of alien technology they encountered, along with detailed analysis of weapons systems, shield frequencies, and propulsion methods used by every species in the galactic community. Dr. Martinez was not simply studying alien biology for scientific curiosity, but was instead methodically mapping the physiological weaknesses and psychological profiles of every species they encountered while building a comprehensive database that would allow Earth's military planners to develop effective countermeasures against any potential threats they might face in the future. As the council session ended and the various alien representatives began filing out of the chamber to return to their respective worlds, Captain Morrison activated a small concealed transmitter that sent an encrypted message across impossible distances using technology that would have made the Galactic Council reconsider their assessment of human capabilities. "Control, this is Endeavor reporting mission accomplished and package successfully delivered," he said quietly into the device. "Beginning Phase 2 of the operation immediately," he added before shutting down the transmitter and preparing to continue their covert intelligence-gathering mission. Far away on Earth in a facility buried so deep beneath the Colorado Rocky Mountains that no alien sensors could detect it, General Patricia Hayes received the encrypted transmission and smiled grimly as she looked around at the most brilliant minds humanity had ever produced working at computer terminals and research stations that incorporated technology decades ahead of anything the Galactic Council had seen. The time for hiding was almost over. 3 months after the Galactic Council had dismissed Earth as a primitive backwater world, the ongoing border dispute between the mighty hegemony and the Zephyrian Empire had finally escalated into the kind of open warfare that periodically swept across different regions of the galaxy as major powers struggled for control over valuable star systems and trade routes that could make or break entire civilizations over the course of centuries. The contested Kepler 442 system had become a massive battleground where enormous dreadnought warships that stretched for kilometers exchanged devastating energy blasts across the cold vacuum of space while smaller fighter craft swarmed around. The larger vessels like angry insects attacking giant predators. The space around the system's 4th planet was littered with the burning wreckage of destroyed ships from both sides as the conflict continued to escalate with no clear victor emerging from the chaos. Admiral Colthax commanded the Hegemony's 4th Fleet from the bridge of his flagship, the massive super dreadnought Dominator, which was over 3 kilometers long and bristled with enough weapons to reduce entire planets to glowing slag within a matter of hours. The veteran commander had fought in dozens of similar conflicts over his long military career and felt completely confident that his battle group of 12 heavy cruisers and 40 destroyers would easily crush whatever forces the Zephyrian Empire could send against them. "Sir, we have incoming hyperspace signatures," reported his tactical officer as new contacts began appearing on the main display screen. 30 vessels approaching from Vector 77 Mark IV using standard Zephyrian formation patterns. The young officer continued, while highlighting the approaching enemy fleet on the 3-dimensional battle map that showed the positions of all ships in the immediate area. Admiral Colfax barely glanced at the tactical display as he prepared to give orders for what he expected would be another routine victory against their longtime enemies. Deploy standard battle formation and prepare all weapon systems for immediate engagement, he commanded while settling back in his command chair. This engagement should be concluded within the hour, he added, with the confidence that came from commanding vastly superior firepower. But the ships that emerged from hyperspace were completely different from anything in the extensive galactic. Military databases that contained detailed information about every known warship design used by the major powers. These vessels were sleek and angular with unusual energy signatures that did not match any known propulsion or weapons technology. They appeared smaller than traditional capital ships, but something about their design and the way they moved through space made the Admiral's experienced eye feel distinctly uneasy about what he was seeing. Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Colfax of the Hegemony 4th Fleet, he announced over the standard military communication frequencies. You are entering a restricted combat zone where active hostilities are taking place, he continued while studying the strange ships more carefully. Identify yourselves immediately and state your business in this system, or you will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly, he added with the authority that came from commanding the most powerful military force in this region of space. The response came back in perfectly clear galactic standard language, but spoken with an accent that none of the bridge crew had ever heard before in all their years of service across the galaxy. This is Fleet Admiral Ben Carter of the United Earth Space Navy, the voice said with calm, professional authority. You are hereby ordered to cease all hostile activities immediately and withdraw your forces from this system, the human commander continued in a tone that suggested he was used to having his orders followed without question. Laughter echoed across the bridge of the Dominator as the hegemony officers found the situation amusing rather than threatening. Earth, Admiral Colfax said, while checking his personal database for information about that particular world. The primitive planet that was classified as barely worth monitoring, he continued while reading the official council report that dismissed humanity as technologically backward. How did they even manage to travel this far from their home system? He wondered aloud. Admiral Lai, am detecting some very unusual energy readings from those human vessels, his science officer reported with growing concern in his voice. Their power output levels are significantly higher than anything their apparent size should be able to generate, he continued while running more detailed scans of the mysterious ships. These readings do not match any known technology in our databases, he added while double-checking his instruments to make sure they were functioning correctly. Admiral Carter's voice crackled over the communication system again with the same calm, professional tone. You have exactly 30 seconds to comply with our demands, he said without any trace of emotion or uncertainty. This is your only warning and we will not repeat ourselves, he added, before the channel went silent, leaving the hegemony fleet to decide how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Admiral Colfax felt his amusement quickly turn to anger at the sheer audacity of these primitive aliens who dared to threaten a fleet that could destroy entire star systems. All ships target those Earth vessels and destroy them immediately, he ordered while activating his ship's massive weapons arrays. Show these primitives the price of interfering with matters that are far beyond their understanding, he commanded, as every ship in his fleet began charging their most powerful weapons for a coordinated attack. The hegemony fleet opened fire with everything they possessed, including plasma cannons that could melt through solid rock, particle beam weapons that could slice through the strongest known metals, and quantum torpedoes that could punch holes through reality itself. The combined firepower of over 50 warships lanced across space toward the small human fleet in a display of destructive power that should have vaporized any known type of spacecraft within seconds. And then something completely impossible happened. That would be talked about and analyzed by military strategists across the galaxy for generations to come. The human ships did not just evade the incoming weapons fire through superior maneuverability, but seemed to dance through the deadly energy beams with a precision that defied everything known about space combat tactics and physics. Energy shields. That should not have been possible on vessels from a primitive civilization, absorbed direct hits from weapons that were designed to level entire cities. When the humans finally returned fire, the results were so devastating that many of the hegemony officers initially thought their sensors had malfunctioned. Beams of pure energy that were far more focused and powerful than anything in the known. Galactic arsenals sliced through advanced military shields like they were made of paper. The destroyer conquest simply ceased to exist as a single shot from the human flagship struck it dead center and completely vaporized the massive warship along with its crew of 3,000 trained soldiers. Impossible, Admiral Colfax breathed, as he watched his supposedly superior fleet being systematically destroyed by vessels that were a fraction of their size. On the bridge of the Earth vessel Freedom, Fleet Admiral Carter observed the one-sided battle with the calm professionalism that came from years of careful planning and preparation. "Target their command ship with precision strikes," he ordered his tactical officer. "Disable their weapons and propulsion systems, but leave life support intact," he continued. "We want survivors to carry word of this engagement back to their government," he added while watching the hegemony flagship desperately trying to maneuver away from the advancing human fleet. Commander Julie Barnes efficiently targeted the massive Dominator with surgical precision and fired a series of carefully calculated shots that disabled the Dreadnought's weapons arrays and engine systems without causing any hull breaches that might endanger the crew. The most powerful warship in hegemony space was reduced to a helpless hulk, floating dead in space within minutes. Hegemony Fleet. "This is Admiral Carter," the human commander announced over all frequencies. "Your forces have been defeated, and you are now at our mercy." He continued with the same calm, professional tone. "Surrender immediately, and you will be treated according to the established laws of warfare," he added. "Any attempt to continue fighting will result in the complete destruction of your remaining vessels," he warned, before giving them time to consider their limited options. The emergency session of the Galactic Council that was hastily called just days after news of the hegemony fleet's devastating defeat reached the various homeworlds was unlike anything in the organization's 1,000-year history of maintaining peace and order across their section of the galaxy. Representatives from every major species and countless minor civilizations packed the enormous chamber while their usual diplomatic composure was completely replaced by barely controlled panic and confusion about what these events might mean for the established balance of power. "The initial reports must be greatly exaggerated," insisted Councillor Vexathul, though his mandibles trembled noticeably as he spoke, and his compound eyes showed the kind of fear that his warrior species rarely displayed. "No primitive civilization could possibly defeat an entire hegemony battle fleet," he continued while reviewing the official records that had been transmitted from the survivors of the engagement. "There must be some explanation that makes sense within our understanding of galactic military capabilities," he added, though his voice lacked conviction. Ambassador Zethkar stood before the massive assembly with his normally bright crystalline form appearing dim and subdued by the shock of what he was being forced to report to the gathered representatives. "I have personally reviewed all available battle records and interviewed the surviving officers who witnessed these events firsthand," he announced while activating holographic displays that showed the tactical breakdown of the engagement. "The human fleet engaged the hegemony Fourth Fleet for exactly 18 minutes and 37 seconds. He continued as the brutal efficiency of the human victory became clear to everyone present. "During this brief engagement, the Earth vessels suffered 0 casualties while completely neutralizing over 50 of the most advanced warships in hegemony space," Zethkar reported as murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. "Not a single human ship was even damaged during the fighting," he added, while the full implications of this statement began to sink in among the assembled delegates who were struggling to understand how such a thing could be possible. The chamber, erupted into chaos as species that had been bitter enemies for centuries suddenly found themselves united by a common fear of this new player on the galactic stage who had appeared from nowhere and demonstrated military capabilities that exceeded anything in their combined arsenals. Ancient alliances and territorial disputes seemed suddenly insignificant compared to the threat posed by a species they had completely underestimated. High Counselor Marix Tell, who had led the Galactic Council for over 3 centuries and had seen the rise and fall of numerous civilizations, slowly raised one ancient hand to restore order to the panicked assembly. "We require answers about how we could have so completely misunderstood the true capabilities of this species," he said in a voice that carried the weight of his vast experience. "Our intelligence-gathering systems have never failed so catastrophically before," he continued, while looking around at the frightened faces of representatives from across the galaxy. Dr. Kelnar Voss, the Council's chief xenoarchaeologist and expert on primitive civilizations, approached the main podium while carrying data tablets in all 4 of his hands. Honored counselors, after spending the past week conducting an intensive review of every piece of intelligence we have collected about humanity over the past several decades, I have reached a conclusion that is both simple and absolutely terrifying," he announced while the chamber fell completely silent. "The answer to our questions is that we saw exactly and precisely what the humans wanted us to see," Dr. Voss continued, as he activated detailed holographic displays showing Earth's solar system. "Every observation we made and every piece of technology we were allowed to detect was deliberately designed to make us believe they were a primitive species," he explained, while highlighting various installations that had somehow remained completely hidden from their advanced monitoring systems. "The evidence now suggests that humanity has been actively observing our civilization for many decades, while carefully concealing their true technological capabilities," Voss continued as the displays showed energy signatures and technological markers that should have been impossible to hide from galactic surveillance methods. "Their real advancement in science and military technology has been hidden with a level of sophistication that suggests they have been planning for eventual contact with galactic civilization far longer than any of us assumed possible," he added. The holographic display changed to show detailed readings from the recent battle that demonstrated technology operating on principles that the galaxy's best scientists did not understand. "Consider the evidence before us," Dr. Voss said while pointing to energy output measurements that defied known physics. "Their warships demonstrated faster-than-light travel using propulsion systems that leave no detectable signatures," he explained. "Their weapons operate on zero-point energy extraction, which is technology that our theoretical models suggest should require a Type II civilization to develop," he continued. "Their defensive systems generated perfect spherical energy shields with no identifiable power source while absorbing direct hits from weapons designed to destroy heavily fortified planetary installations," Voss added, while the measurements showed force levels that should have been impossible for ships of that size. "Everything about their demonstrated capabilities suggests technological advancement that exceeds our own by several centuries at minimum," he concluded. Counselor Neftim's aquatic features rippled with distress as she tried to process these revelations. "But our long-range surveys of their planet showed no evidence of advanced industrial capabilities," she protested while reviewing the official records. "We detected no massive energy signatures, no orbital construction facilities, no signs of the kind of infrastructure required to support such advanced technology," she continued while her bioluminescent patterns flickered with confusion. "All of it was hidden," Dr. Voss interrupted while changing the display to show theoretical models of concealed installations. "Underground facilities that extend far deeper than our sensors could penetrate," he explained. "Underwater construction, sites that were completely shielded from detection," he continued. "Industrial operations hidden in pocket dimensions that we did not even know were possible to create," he added while the scope of human deception became clear. "The humans have been preparing for this moment for longer than most of us have been alive, Voss concluded. They studied our technology, learned our weaknesses, and developed countermeasures for every military system we possess, he said, while the chamber remained silent. We walked directly into a trap that was decades in the making, he added as the full extent of their vulnerability became apparent. From the back of the chamber, a new voice spoke up with calm authority that cut through the atmosphere of panic and confusion. Captain Morrison stepped forward, still wearing his simple Earth uniform, but now carrying himself with the confidence of someone whose species had just completely revolutionized galactic politics and military strategy through careful planning and superior execution. "Honored counselors," he said, while his words were automatically translated into dozens of different languages simultaneously through the chamber's advanced communication systems. "I am authorized by the United Earth government to speak on behalf of our species regarding the establishment of formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council," he continued, while every eye in the chamber focused on this representative of the new power that had emerged from the shadows. High Counselor Marixtel studied the human with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations across the centuries. "Captain Morrison, I believe you have been observing our council sessions for some time now," he said while considering the implications of human intelligence gathering operations. "What conclusions did your people reach about our galactic civilization?" he asked. Morrison's expression grew stern as he prepared to deliver a message that would forever change the relationship between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. "We concluded that galactic civilization is ruled by fear and dominated by species who use their superior technology to exploit and control those they consider to be inferior," he said bluntly. "This system of oppression and exploitation ends today," he added while his words echoed through the silent chamber. The response from the major powers of the Galactic Council to humanity's demands for sweeping changes to the established order was both swift and entirely predictable, as 7 of the most powerful species in known space began assembling what would become the largest military force in recorded galactic history. Within just 1 week of Captain Morrison's bold ultimatum, over 2,000 warships from across the galaxy had converged at the edge of human space under the unified command of the Zephyrian Empire's most decorated and experienced military. Leader Admiral Tysara stood on the command bridge of the massive fleet carrier World Ender, while her scaled reptilian features were set in the kind of grim determination that had made her legendary among military commanders throughout the galaxy. The veteran officer had never lost a single battle during her 4 decades of distinguished service, and she had no intention of allowing one primitive world to end her perfect record of victory, regardless of what had happened to the overconfident. "Hegemony Fleet, all fleet commanders report ready status confirmed, Admiral," announced her communications officer, while monitoring the constant stream of messages flowing between the hundreds of different ship types that made up this unprecedented coalition force. The massive display screens showed battlecruisers from the Hegemony, swarm fighters from the Hive Collective, planet-killing dreadnoughts from the Silicon Concordat, and dozens of other vessel classifications from species across the galaxy who had united against the human threat. Admiral Tysara carefully studied the tactical displays that showed the overwhelming military force now under her direct command, while feeling confident that no single world could possibly stand against such concentrated firepower. "Begin the advance toward the Sol system using full battle formation," she ordered while settling into her command chair. "If humanity wishes to threaten the established galactic order, then they will learn the price of such dangerous arrogance," she added, as the massive fleet began moving through space like an unstoppable tide of destruction. The Coalition Armada advanced toward Earth's solar system while their long-range sensors began detecting the familiar energy signatures of human vessels moving to intercept their approach, but the numbers being reported seemed completely impossible given what they expected to face. Advanced scanning systems that could detect ships across multiple light-years of space were showing human fleet compositions that made no tactical sense whatsoever. "Admiral, we are receiving updated intelligence on enemy force deployments," reported the tactical officer with obvious confusion in her voice as she reviewed the sensor data multiple times to ensure accuracy. "Human fleet composition appears to be minimal, with only 47 vessels detected moving to intercept our advance," she continued while highlighting the contacts on the main display. "This represents less than 3% of our total force strength," she added, while double-checking the readings. Admiral Thisara blinked her large reptilian eyes in complete disbelief as she processed this information. 47 ships against our fleet of over 2,000, she repeated, while studying the tactical display more carefully. "Are they attempting some form of suicide attack? Or do they have reinforcements hidden somewhere in the system?" she wondered. Aloud, while considering various possibilities for this apparent tactical insanity, "Confirmed, Admiral," the tactical officer responded while running additional sensor sweeps of the surrounding space. "Long-range scans show the human vessels maintaining standard defensive formation at the edge of their asteroid belt," she continued. "No additional contacts detected in the immediate area," she added, though her voice carried undertones of uncertainty about what they might be missing. The Admiral felt a distinct chill of unease despite the overwhelming numerical advantage her forces possessed over the humans. Either these primitive aliens had completely lost their collective minds and were planning some form of heroic but pointless last stand, or they possessed another surprise that would explain their apparent confidence in the face of impossible odds. Given what had happened to the supposedly invincible Hegemony Fourth Fleet, Admiral Thisara strongly suspected the latter possibility. "All ships maintain maximum alert status and deploy advanced sensor drones throughout the system," she commanded while activating additional scanning protocols. "I want detailed information about every piece of space debris larger than a pebble in this entire solar system," she continued. "If the humans are planning some form of ambush or surprise attack, then we will detect it before they can spring their trap," she added, while remembering the lessons learned from the previous human engagement. As the massive coalition fleet entered the outer regions of Earth's solar system, Fleet Admiral Ben Carter stood calmly on the bridge of the newest human flagship designated UES Defiance, while around him his crew worked with the kind of quiet efficiency that comes from years of intensive training and preparation. The advanced control systems represented the culmination of nearly a century of hidden research and development that had been carefully concealed from galactic observation. "Admiral, the Coalition fleet has crossed our outer perimeter markers," reported Commander Kevin Walsh from his position at the sensor station while monitoring the approach of the enemy armada. "They are maintaining standard battle formation and advancing at approximately 1/4 impulse power," he continued while updating the tactical displays. "Current estimated time to weapons range is 47 minutes, he added. "Understood." "Commander," Admiral Carter replied with the same calm professionalism that had characterized human military operations since first contact with galactic civilization. "Signal all ships and orbital installations to execute Plan Omega immediately," he ordered, while activating communication systems that would coordinate the most complex military operation in human history. Across the human fleet and throughout the solar system, installations that had appeared to be nothing more than ordinary asteroids floating in space suddenly came alive with activity. What the advancing alien forces had assumed were natural space rocks revealed themselves to be massive weapons platforms that had been disguised and positioned over the course of many months while remaining completely undetected by even the most advanced galactic surveillance technology. But the hidden asteroid bases were only the beginning of humanity's carefully prepared defensive strategy. The space around the advancing coalition fleet suddenly erupted with new sensor contacts as hundreds of previously invisible vessels seemed to materialize from absolutely nowhere. Ships that had been completely undetectable even to the most sophisticated scanning systems now appeared throughout the solar system in perfect tactical positions. Admiral Thisara watched in growing horror as her overwhelming numerical advantage completely evaporated within the span of just a few minutes. "Where did all these ships come from?" she demanded, while staring at tactical displays that now showed her forces outnumbered by nearly 3-1. "Our sensors detected absolutely nothing until this moment," she continued, while her voice began to show signs of the panic that was spreading through her command staff. Her science officer's voice trembled with disbelief as he attempted to explain readings that defied everything known about physics and military technology. "Admiral, the humans appear to be using some form of dimensional displacement technology that we have never encountered before," he reported while frantically checking his instruments. "These vessels were literally existing in a different layer of space-time until they chose to reveal themselves," he continued. "This level of technological sophistication exceeds anything in our databases by several centuries," he added. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that continued to demonstrate capabilities that seemed to mock everything the galaxy thought it knew about the limits of military technology. Energy beams that defied known physics reached across impossible distances with perfect accuracy, while entire squadrons of the most advanced alien warships were disabled within seconds by weapons that appeared to bend the fabric of space itself. Around their targets, Admiral Carter had learned valuable lessons from humanity's long and bloody history of warfare, where victory often depended not just on superior firepower, but on sending clear messages that would prevent future conflicts. "Target only their command ships and major vessels," he ordered his fleet commanders. "Disable their weapons and propulsion systems, but leave life support and crew quarters intact," he continued. "I want every survivor to return home and provide detailed reports about exactly what they witnessed here today," he added. The engagement that military historians would later refer to as the Second Battle of Sol lasted less than 1 hour from first contact to complete alien surrender. When the human weapons finally fell silent, over 2,000 of the galaxy's most technologically advanced warships floated helplessly in space, with their crews completely unharmed, but their vessels totally neutralized and defenseless. Admiral Thisara sat motionless in her command chair while staring at displays that showed the complete destruction of her military career and everything she thought she understood about galactic power structures. Her massive coalition fleet had been systematically dismantled by an enemy that had revealed. 6 months after the devastating defeat of the largest military coalition in galactic history at the Second Battle of Sol, the entire structure of interstellar civilization faced a crisis that threatened to completely tear apart political alliances and power structures that had remained stable for over 10,000 years of recorded history. Species that had been trusted allies for countless generations now regarded each other with deep suspicion and paranoia, while wondering which of their neighbors might also have been concealing their true technological capabilities from the rest of the galactic community. The emergency summit that was hastily organized on the politically neutral world of Haven Station brought together representatives from every major power in known space, along with delegates from hundreds of minor civilizations who were all struggling to understand how the established order had been so completely overturned by a single species that had appeared from nowhere. For the first time in the long and distinguished history of the Galactic Council, the critical session was being moderated and controlled by a representative of humanity. Ambassador Rachel Stone stood confidently at the main podium while her calm presence seemed to command instant respect from beings who had once considered her entire species to be barely worthy of notice or consideration. Behind her, massive holographic displays showed detailed proposals and policy documents that represented years of careful planning and would fundamentally revolutionize every aspect of galactic civilization if they were accepted and implemented by the assembled delegates. "Honored representatives of the galactic community," she began, while her clear voice carried easily to every corner of the vast assembly chamber. "We stand together at a critical crossroads in the history of interstellar civilization," she continued as her words were simultaneously translated into hundreds of different languages and communication methods. The old methods of exploitation and domination through superior military force have brought us all to the very edge of total galactic warfare, she added, while looking around at the frightened faces of delegates who represented trillions of sentient beings. High Counselor Marixtel, who now appeared to be showing every single one of his 8 centuries of age, leaned forward in his specialized floating chair while studying this human representative with ancient eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of numerous civilizations across the galaxy. "Ambassador Stone, your species has certainly demonstrated remarkable and unexpected military capabilities that have shocked the entire galactic community," he said carefully. "However, superior firepower alone does not automatically grant moral authority to restructure interstellar society," he continued while his voice carried the weight of vast experience. Rachel nodded respectfully toward the elderly counselor while acknowledging the validity of his concerns. "You are absolutely correct, honored counselor, and that is precisely why we are not demanding submission or surrender from anyone," she replied diplomatically. "Instead, humanity is offering genuine partnership and cooperation based on equality, rather than domination." She continued while activating the holographic displays to show detailed plans that had been developed over many decades of careful observation and analysis. "The Terran Confederation hereby proposes the immediate establishment of the Galactic Democratic Union, where every intelligent species, regardless of their current level of technological development, will be granted an equal voice in all decisions affecting interstellar affairs," she announced, while the chamber erupted in the familiar chaos of multiple species attempting to express their opinions simultaneously through various forms of communication. Ambassador Zethkar's crystalline form pulsed brightly with obvious agitation as he rose to address the assembly. "This proposal is completely impossible to implement," he protested while his multiple eyes focused intently on the human representative. "Primitive species cannot be trusted with important decisions that affect the survival and prosperity of advanced civilizations across the galaxy," he continued. "They lack the knowledge and experience necessary to understand the complex implications of interstellar policy," he added, while many other delegates expressed similar concerns. "Please define what you mean by primitive," Rachel replied calmly while maintaining her diplomatic composure. "Just 3 months ago, your own intelligence services classified humanity as a Type 0.7 civilization that posed no threat to galactic stability," she continued with a slight smile. "Today, our technological capabilities clearly exceed anything currently available to any species represented in this chamber," she added, while the uncomfortable truth of her statement hung in the air like a weapon. "If your assessment methods are so fundamentally flawed that they completely missed every significant technological achievement of an entire civilization, then how can any of us trust your ability to accurately classify other species?" she asked, while looking around at delegates who were beginning to realize the full implications of their intelligence failures. Dr. Kelnar Voss approached a secondary podium while carrying updated research data about the scope of human deception and technological advancement. "Ambassador Stone raises an extremely valid concern about our current classification systems," he admitted reluctantly. "Our initial survey of Earth somehow failed to detect any evidence of their true capabilities," he continued. "If our intelligence-gathering methods are so inadequate that they can be completely fooled by a single species, then we must assume that our assessments of other civilizations may be equally unreliable," he added. From the section reserved for the Hive Collective, Queen Voice Thara spoke through her specialized translator device. "The humans managed to completely destroy 2 separate fleets without suffering any casualties whatsoever," she observed while her compound eyes studied the tactical reports. "This level of military superiority suggests either impossibly advanced technology or something else entirely," she continued with obvious concern in her translated voice. Rachel smiled slightly while preparing to reveal information that would fundamentally change how the galaxy understood human capabilities. The something else is called strategic planning and superior intelligence gathering, Your Majesty, she replied. Humanity has spent the past century conducting detailed studies of every species in the galactic community, she continued, as new displays showed the extensive scope of human research operations. We know your technological capabilities, your preferred tactical formations, your psychological profiles, and your cultural weaknesses, she added. We won those military engagements before the first shots were ever fired because we understood our opponents better than they understood themselves, she explained, while the full implications of this statement began to sink in among the assembled delegates. Every piece of equipment in your fleets, every tactical doctrine in your military manuals, and every strategic weakness in your defenses has been carefully analyzed and catalogued by human intelligence services, she continued. The chamber fell, completely silent as representatives from across the galaxy realized that their most closely guarded military secrets had been compromised for decades without their knowledge. If humanity possessed such detailed intelligence about their capabilities, then the recent military defeats represented only a small demonstration of human superiority rather than their maximum potential. Counselor Neftim's aquatic features showed deep concern as she processed these revelations. Are you saying that humans have been conducting espionage operations against our civilizations for an extended period? She asked, while her bioluminescent patterns flickered with distress. How long have you been gathering intelligence about our military and technological capabilities? She continued. We prefer to call it defensive intelligence gathering rather than espionage, Rachel replied diplomatically. When your species is officially classified as primitive and surrounded by vastly superior civilizations that have demonstrated a clear willingness to exploit weaker species, developing comprehensive knowledge about potential threats becomes a matter of basic survival, she explained. She activated new holographic displays that showed the true scope of human expansion and development that had been carefully concealed from galactic observation for decades. The truth that we can now reveal is that humanity achieved genuine interstellar civilization over 50 years ago, she announced, while images of vast underground cities, orbital installations hidden in pocket dimensions, and resource extraction operations spanning multiple star systems appeared before the stunned assembly. We have been concealing our expansion, our technological advancement, and our true military capabilities because we needed time to thoroughly understand what kind of galactic civilization we were dealing with before revealing ourselves, she continued, while the evidence of human deception became overwhelming. Admiral Thyssera, who was now attending the emergency summit as a military observer rather than a fleet commander, spoke from her position within the Zephyrian delegation, while her scaled features still showed the psychological impact of her devastating defeat. Your deception was absolutely complete, she admitted with grudging professional respect. My intelligence services, which are considered among the best in the galaxy, detected nothing suspicious about your capabilities, she continued. Even our most advanced surveillance technology was completely fooled by your concealment methods, she added while reviewing the tactical reports that still seemed impossible to believe. We learned from the absolute best teachers available, Rachel acknowledged, while gesturing toward the assembled representatives. Every single species represented in this chamber has used deception, misdirection, and covert intelligence operations to gain strategic advantages over your neighbors at various points throughout galactic history, she explained. Humanity simply studied your methods and improved upon them using superior planning and execution. She continued with the confidence that came from decades of successful operations. High Counselor Marixtel raised one ancient hand to restore order to the increasingly agitated assembly, while his expression showed the weight of centuries of experience dealing with galactic crises. Ambassador Stone, you have spoken extensively about restructuring interstellar society and creating new democratic institutions, he said carefully. What exactly are you proposing that we do with our current governmental systems? He asked, while considering the massive implications of such sweeping changes. Rachel straightened her posture while recognizing that this moment would determine whether the transition to a new galactic order would be peaceful or require additional demonstrations of human military superiority. We propose the complete elimination of the current classification system that treats some species as inferior to others based solely on their technological development, she announced, while new displays showed detailed plans for governmental restructuring. No more slavery in any form across any world within our sphere of influence, she continued, as murmurs of concern rippled through delegates whose economies depended heavily on forced labor from conquered species. No more exploitation of worlds that are classified as primitive simply because they have not yet developed interstellar travel capabilities, she added while her voice grew more forceful. No more military expansion designed to subjugate weaker civilizations for the benefit of more technologically advanced species, she declared, while looking directly at representatives from the major imperial powers. The era of galactic civilization, based on the domination of the weak by the strong, ends today, she concluded, while the chamber fell silent under the weight of her ultimatum. Ambassador Zethkar's crystalline form flared brightly with anger as he rose to address what he clearly considered to be an unacceptable challenge to the natural order of galactic society. "You dare to make such sweeping demands," he protested, while his multiple eyes focused intently on the human representative. "You represent a single world making threats against thousands of established civilizations," he continued. "What gives you the authority to dictate terms to the rest of the galaxy?" he asked, while his voice carried the arrogance that had characterized galactic politics for millennia. Rachel's expression grew cold as she prepared to deliver the response that every delegate had been dreading since the news of humanity's military victories had reached their respective governments. "We are the species that just destroyed your two most powerful military fleets without suffering a single casualty," she replied bluntly. "We possess technological capabilities that exceed your own by several centuries," she continued while activating displays that showed detailed analysis of every major military force in known space. "Our intelligence services have identified the exact location of every major military installation, industrial facility, and population center belonging to each civilization represented in this chamber," she announced, while the implications of this statement sent waves of fear through the assembly. "We know the defensive capabilities of your homeworlds, the deployment patterns of your fleets, and the strategic weaknesses that could be exploited if necessary," she added. "More importantly, we have determined that any coalition of galactic forces that could realistically be assembled against us would be defeated as easily as the previous attempts," she continued, while tactical projections showed the futility of military resistance against human capabilities. "The question you must ask yourselves is how many more fleets you are willing to sacrifice before accepting the inevitable changes that are coming," she concluded. The chamber erupted into chaos as representatives began shouting accusations and threats, while their usual diplomatic protocols completely broke down under the stress of this unprecedented situation. Species that had maintained careful neutrality for centuries suddenly found themselves forced to choose sides in a conflict that would reshape the entire galaxy regardless of the outcome. Captain Morrison, who had been observing the proceedings from the diplomatic gallery, stepped forward to join Ambassador Stone at the main podium. "The choice facing each of your governments is actually quite simple," he announced, while his calm voice cut through the noise and confusion. "You can join us in building a new galactic community based on equality and mutual respect," he continued. "Or you can continue playing the old games of domination and exploitation while knowing that the rules have fundamentally changed," he added. "But understand that humanity will no longer tolerate the systematic oppression of less advanced species. Morrison declared while his words were transmitted to every homeworld represented in the chamber. We will intervene wherever we find evidence of slavery, genocide, or the exploitation of primitive worlds, he continued. Our military forces are already deployed throughout the galaxy and are prepared to enforce these new standards immediately, he added. The revelation that human forces were already positioned across galactic space without being detected sent another wave of panic through the assembly, as delegates realized that their homeworlds might already be under observation or even direct threat from weapons they could not detect or defend against. The scope of human infiltration and preparation was becoming clear as truly galaxy-wide rather than limited to their local region of space. Dr. Voss approached his research station while frantically checking updated intelligence reports that were still arriving from across the galaxy. Confirmed sightings of unidentified vessels matching human design specifications have been reported in over 40 different star systems during the past 72 hours, he announced, while his voice showed obvious distress. These ships appeared simultaneously across thousands of light-years of space, he continued. The coordination required for such an operation suggests planning and preparation on a scale we never imagined possible, he added. Our long-range monitoring stations are detecting energy signatures consistent with human technology in the vicinity of every major population center and military installation throughout known space, he reported while updating the tactical displays. If these readings are accurate, then humanity has achieved a level of strategic positioning that makes conventional military resistance completely impossible, he concluded, while the full scope of human preparation became undeniably clear. Queen voice. Ketathara spoke again through her translator, while her compound eyes showed the kind of fear that her warrior species had not experienced in generations. How long have your forces been in position around our worlds? She asked, while trying to process the implications of such extensive covert operations. What are your intentions regarding our civilian populations? She continued with obvious concern for the billions of beings under her protection. Our forces have standing orders to take no offensive action against civilian targets under any circumstances, Rachel replied immediately, while recognizing the importance of addressing these legitimate concerns. Humanity has no interest in conquest or domination, she continued. We want to see the galaxy develop into a community of equals where every species can prosper according to their own values and traditions, she added. However, we will not hesitate to use whatever force is necessary to protect innocent beings from oppression regardless of which species is responsible for their suffering, she warned, while her expression made it clear that this was not an empty threat. The era of might makes right is over and will not be permitted to return, she declared, while the assembled delegates began to realize that they were witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of galactic civilization. 3 hours of intense deliberation and heated debate followed Ambassador Stone's ultimatum as representatives from across the galaxy struggled to comprehend the complete transformation of everything they had believed about interstellar power, structures, and their own security within the established galactic order. Emergency communications flowed constantly between the summit location and hundreds of different homeworlds, as governments that had ruled for millennia suddenly found themselves forced to make decisions that would determine the survival of their entire civilizations. The private consultation chambers adjacent to the main assembly hall buzzed with frantic activity as species-specific delegations held urgent meetings to discuss their limited options and the potential consequences of either accepting or rejecting humanity's demands for sweeping changes to galactic society. Many of the assembled representatives had never faced such a fundamental challenge to their authority and were struggling to develop coherent responses to this unprecedented situation. In the hegemony consultation chamber, Ambassador Zethkar stood before emergency holographic projections of his government's highest-ranking officials while trying to explain how their supposedly primitive adversaries had managed to completely outmaneuver the most sophisticated intelligence services in known space. The humans have been preparing for this confrontation far longer than any of our analysts predicted, he reported, while reviewing tactical assessments that painted an increasingly hopeless picture. Every major military installation within our territory is currently under direct observation by undetected human forces, he continued, while the holographic images of his superiors showed obvious signs of panic and disbelief. Our fleet commanders estimate that conventional resistance would result in the complete destruction of our naval capabilities within hours, he added, while the reality of their situation became undeniably clear to even the most stubborn military leaders. More critically, our intelligence services have confirmed that human agents have been operating within our territory for decades without detection, Zethkar reported, while his crystalline form dimmed with the shame of such a massive security failure. They possess detailed knowledge of our governmental structures, military capabilities, and economic systems that makes any form of covert resistance impossible, he concluded, while his government struggled to accept the complete collapse of their strategic position. Similar conversations were taking place simultaneously across dozens of different consultation chambers as the various galactic powers came to terms with the fact that their previous assumptions about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. The scope of human intelligence gathering and military preparation was becoming clear as something that had been planned and executed over the course of multiple generations rather than a recent development. The Zephyrian Empire's military leadership had gathered in their secure consultation chamber where Admiral Thyssara was providing detailed briefings about the technological capabilities she had witnessed during her defeat at the Second Battle of Sol. Their weapon systems operate on principles that our best scientists cannot explain, she reported while reviewing sensor data that continued to defy analysis. The energy output from their smallest vessels exceeds that of our largest dreadnoughts, while their defensive systems absorb direct hits from planet-killing weapons without showing any signs of damage, she continued, while her scaled features showed the psychological impact of confronting such overwhelming technological superiority. Any attempt at military resistance would be futile and would only result in the unnecessary deaths of our crews, she concluded. Even more concerning is the evidence that they possess intelligence about our military doctrines and tactical preferences. That suggests they have been studying our forces for decades, Admiral Thyssara added, while reviewing classified strategic documents that should have been impossible for outsiders to access. They knew exactly how we would respond to their initial provocations and had prepared countermeasures for every strategy we might employ, she explained. In the chamber reserved for the Hive Collective, Queen Voice Ketthara communicated directly with the central consciousness that guided her species while trying to convey the unprecedented nature of the threat they now faced. The collective mind that had successfully coordinated the actions of trillions of individuals across multiple star systems was struggling to process information that challenged every assumption about galactic military capabilities. The human demonstration of dimensional displacement technology suggests scientific advancement that exceeds our own theoretical models by centuries, she reported, while transmitting detailed sensor readings back to the homeworld for analysis. Their ability to hide entire fleets in parallel dimensions indicates mastery of physics that we believe to be impossible, she continued. More significantly, their intelligence-gathering capabilities appear to have penetrated our most secure facilities without triggering any of our detection systems, Ketthara added, while the implications of such sophisticated espionage operations became clear to the collective consciousness. If they possess similar intelligence about our biological vulnerabilities, then conventional resistance could result in species-wide extinction, she concluded, while the hive mind calculated probability matrices that showed increasingly hopeless outcomes for military confrontation. As the private consultations continued, Dr. Voss was conducting his own analysis of the human proposals while trying to determine whether the offered alternatives to military confrontation represented genuine opportunities for peaceful coexistence or simply more sophisticated forms of domination. His expertise in studying the development patterns of various civilizations gave him unique insights into the long-term implications of accepting human leadership. The proposed Galactic Democratic Union structure appears to be based on genuine, power-sharing rather than concealed human control, he reported to High Counselor Marixtel during a private meeting in the Council's secure chamber. Their historical records suggest a species that values individual freedom and representative government, even when dealing with internal conflicts, he continued while reviewing intercepted human communications. However, their demonstrated willingness to use overwhelming force to achieve their political objectives indicates that opposition to their proposed changes would be met with swift and decisive military action, Dr. Voss added while calculating the potential costs of resistance. The choice appears to be between accepting their terms voluntarily or having those same terms imposed through force, he concluded. High Counselor Marixtel studied the analysis while drawing upon 8 centuries of experience dealing with galactic crises and political transformations. Have you identified any evidence of deception in their current proposals? He asked, while considering the possibility that human offers of partnership might be designed to facilitate easier conquest and subjugation of galactic civilization. Their behavior patterns and communication methods suggest genuine commitment to the principles they have outlined, Dr. Voss replied after reviewing extensive psychological profiles. However, their superior intelligence-gathering capabilities mean that they possess detailed knowledge of our weaknesses that could be exploited if their intentions change in the future, he added, while highlighting the fundamental vulnerability of their position. The most concerning aspect of this situation is that we have no reliable method for assessing their true intentions or capabilities, he continued. They have already demonstrated the ability to completely deceive our intelligence services for decades while preparing for this confrontation, he explained. We must assume that everything we think we know about human society and motivations could be equally misleading, he concluded. As the consultation period neared its end, emergency messages began arriving from across the galaxy reporting the sudden appearance of human vessels in previously secure star systems that had been considered far beyond the reach of any potential threats. The coordination and scale of these simultaneous deployments provided additional evidence of the extensive preparation that had preceded humanity's revelation of their true capabilities. The message was becoming unmistakably clear to every government, represented at the summit, that resistance to human demands would be met with immediate military action from forces that were already positioned to strike at the heart of every major civilization in known space. The choice between voluntary cooperation and forced submission was no longer theoretical but had become an immediate decision that would determine the fate of trillions of sentient beings across the galaxy. When High Counselor Marixtel finally called the assembly back to order after the extended consultation period, the atmosphere in the chamber had changed dramatically as the reality of their situation had finally penetrated even the most stubborn and prideful delegations. Representatives who had entered the session as confident leaders of powerful civilizations now found themselves reduced to the status of petitioners, hoping for favorable terms from a species they had previously dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. High Counselor Marixtel slowly rose from his ancient floating chair, while his weathered features showed the weight of the momentous decision that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. The chamber fell completely silent, as representatives from across the galaxy prepared to hear the formal response to humanity's ultimatum that would determine whether the transition to a new interstellar order would be accomplished through peaceful cooperation or devastating military conquest. After extensive consultation with our respective governments and careful consideration of all available options, the elderly counselor began while his voice carried across the vast assembly hall. The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding the proposals presented by the Terran Confederation. He paused while looking around at the faces of delegates who represented thousands of different species and trillions of sentient beings whose futures now hung in the balance. We hereby vote to accept the establishment of the Galactic Democratic Union under the framework and principles outlined by Ambassador Stone, Marixtel announced while the chamber remained eerily quiet as the magnitude of this historic moment began to sink in among the assembled representatives. The final vote count was 342 civilizations in favor, 23 opposed, with 15 abstentions, he continued, while formally recording the decision that would mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. Ambassador Rachel Stone stepped forward to accept this unprecedented transfer of galactic authority while maintaining the diplomatic composure that had characterized her presentations throughout the crisis. On behalf of humanity and all species who have suffered under the previous system of exploitation and domination, I accept this decision and pledge that the new galactic order will be based on equality, justice, and mutual respect among all sentient beings, she declared while her words were transmitted across the galaxy. The transition to democratic governance will begin immediately with the establishment of interim committees to oversee the dismantling of slavery systems, the protection of primitive worlds from exploitation, and the creation of new institutions that will give every species an equal voice in interstellar affairs regardless of their current level of technological development, she continued while outlining the massive changes that would transform galactic society. Captain Morrison approached the podium to address the practical aspects of implementing these sweeping reforms, while human forces across the galaxy prepared to enforce the new order. Effective immediately, all slavery operations within the territory covered by this agreement must cease, he announced, while his words carried the authority of the most powerful military force in known space. Species currently held in bondage will be granted immediate freedom and provided with assistance in establishing their own independent governments, he continued. All military operations designed to conquer or subjugate less advanced civilizations are hereby terminated, Morrison declared while monitoring communications from human forces positioned throughout galactic space. Any attempts to continue such activities will be met with immediate intervention by Earth Defense Forces, he added while making it clear that compliance with the new order was not optional. The exploitation of primitive worlds for resources, or slave labor, is now prohibited under the new Galactic Charter, he continued, while reviewing reports from human intelligence services that had been documenting such abuses for decades. These worlds will be placed under the protection of the Galactic Democratic Union until their inhabitants achieve sufficient development to participate as equals in interstellar society, he explained. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out to report this historic decision to their respective governments, the true scope of the changes that were already underway became apparent through emergency communications arriving from across the galaxy. Human forces that had been positioned in secret for months were now revealing themselves and beginning enforcement operations that would fundamentally alter the balance of power throughout known space. On the industrial world of Kepler 438b, where the hegemony had maintained massive slave labor camps for over 2 centuries, human warships appeared in orbit while broadcasting messages of liberation to the millions of beings who had been forced to work in the crystalline mines that powered much of galactic technology. The sophisticated orbital defense platforms that should have protected the planet from any conceivable attack were neutralized within minutes by weapons that operated on principles the defenders could not understand or counter. Liberation forces, equipped with advanced medical technology and humanitarian supplies, began landing on the planet's surface while establishing secure zones where former slaves could receive treatment and begin the process of rebuilding their shattered communities. The hegemony military garrison that had maintained control through terror and brutality for generations found themselves completely outmatched by human forces that moved with precision and efficiency. Similar operations were taking place simultaneously on dozens of worlds across the galaxy as humanity fulfilled its promise to end the systematic oppression that had characterized interstellar civilization for millennia. Species that had been written off as permanently enslaved suddenly found themselves free for the first time in living memory, while their former masters watched helplessly as centuries of exploitation came to an abrupt end. On the primitive world of Ross 128b, where the Zephyrian Empire had been conducting covert resource extraction operations while the native population remained unaware of the galactic community's existence, human intervention forces arrived to document the extent of the exploitation and begin the process of restoring the planet's natural environment. The mining operations that had been strip mining valuable minerals while poisoning the local ecosystem were shut down immediately. The native species that had been slowly dying from environmental contamination caused by off-world industrial operations found their world suddenly healing as advanced human environmental restoration technology began reversing decades of ecological damage. The Zephyrian extraction crews were given the choice of voluntary departure or forced removal, while their equipment was dismantled and removed from the planet. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance while monitoring reports from human forces across the galaxy as the largest humanitarian operation in recorded history unfolded with military precision. "Status report from all theater commanders," he requested, while reviewing the scope of operations that spanned thousands of light years and involved millions of liberated beings. "Operation Freedom is proceeding according to schedule," Admiral reported. His communications officer, while updating the strategic displays that showed human forces positioned throughout galactic space. "All major slave labor facilities have been secured with minimal resistance," she continued. "Casualty reports indicate 0 human losses and minimal civilian casualties during liberation operations," she added, while the efficiency of their planning became apparent. "Liberated populations are responding positively to our intervention, with most former slaves requesting immediate assistance in establishing independent governments," the officer continued while reviewing reports from humanitarian teams. Medical teams report that many of the freed populations will require extensive treatment for malnutrition and abuse, but long-term prognosis appears favorable, she explained. Fleet Admiral Carter nodded with satisfaction while considering the magnitude of what they had accomplished in just a few hours of coordinated action. "Signal all commands to continue current operations while maintaining strict adherence to civilian protection protocols," he ordered. "The galaxy is watching our every move, and we must demonstrate that human intervention represents liberation rather than conquest," he added. Dr. Lisa Martinez, who had transitioned from her original role as a xenobiologist to become Earth's director of interstellar humanitarian operations, approached the Admiral with updated reports from across the operational area. "Initial surveys indicate that we have successfully liberated over 40 million sentient beings from various forms of slavery and exploitation," she announced, while reviewing data from medical teams and liberation forces. "The psychological impact on both the liberated populations and their former oppressors appears to be exactly what we predicted," she continued while analyzing behavioral reports from across the galaxy. "Former slave species are exhibiting signs of hope and determination, while their previous masters are showing compliance with our demands rather than attempting futile resistance," she explained. "Most importantly, the speed and coordination of our operations has demonstrated to every government in the galaxy that human capabilities extend far beyond what they witnessed during our military engagements," Dr. Martinez added. "The message that resistance is futile while cooperation will be rewarded appears to be reaching every population center throughout known space," she concluded. As night fell over Haven Station, where the historic summit had taken place, Ambassador Rachel Stone stood alone in her quarters while looking out at the stars that now represented a galaxy forever changed by humanity's emergence as the dominant interstellar power.